name is Catherine, and I'm the owner, founder of Sew Your Bag. What we're going to be working on today is going to be this very simple pouch called the Glow Up Pouch. Now, whenever I do a pattern, I like to be able to teach you something new or a new technique that is transferable to any other bag that you make in the future. So every bag pattern that I design, there is one new thing, one or two new things that you will learn while making that bag. This pouch was actually given away during the luxury sewing retreat, and everybody who attended that received this little goodie bag with the pouch. It was a QR code for the pouch, a piece of fabric, and some heavy interface, which we'll be using for this bag. The lining fabric I left to each participant to choose their own lining fabric. In this case, for this particular pouch, I used waterproof canvas, as you can see. But for today's lesson, I will be using cotton fabric, as that is more readily available to most people. Just so that you're aware of what you will need, I will cover with you all of the materials at the beginning, and then we will get into sewing. In addition, there will be some camera switching, so if camera switching bothers anybody, I will let you know when I'm going to switch the camera, and I'll say things like, let's go to the sewing machine, let's go to the cutting mat. That way you'll know if you need to look away for a second while I switch the cameras. You will know when to look away. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you enjoy making this pouch. Okay, so we're back and we're going to get ready to sew our pouch. So this pouch actually lays completely flat, so you can see it is flat on the top and on the bottom. It's a great pouch if you have makeup that you take with you on a trip. You can always clear out your makeup after the trip and then just throw this back into your luggage so you're ready to go for the next trip. I don't always take all of my makeup with me, so I take exactly what I need, and I do normally switch it out. As I mentioned earlier, this pattern was written for the luxury sewing retreat, and it was done so that we could learn how to construct the bottom, which is the same bottom that is used on the Sinmi bag, Sinmi bag, that we sewed at the retreat. So this was just a way to give people practice. If you were part of the retreat, you did receive a kit. And so the kit had this card. On the back of the card is a QR code that you could use to get the pattern for free. If you were not part of the retreat and you want the pattern, it is on my website, and I will put the link once again in the show notes below. There was a label or a tag, and this one, because it's a makeup bag, says, "Hey, good looking." I also gave a piece of Ankara fabric or Ankara-inspired fabric, some DLH2010 Heavy, and this is my own interface. I did not include lining fabric because I felt that people should line the bag the way that they wanted to. You can use one fat quarter worth of cotton, which is what I will be using for this. On the actual demo bag or the sample bag that's on the picture, I used waterproof canvas on the outside and the inside of my pouch. But for today's demo, I will be using cotton because it is readily available to everyone. So we'll talk about interfacing in a few minutes, but for right now, let me tell you exactly what other supplies you're going to need besides the pattern. So what you will need is you will need a rotary cutter or a pair of scissors. I will be using double-sided tape. So I will be using this double-sided tape in order to hold my zipper in place. I like it better than I do pins or clips because it doesn't distort the material. I will have clips on hand because I will need those to be able to clip my bag together as I sew it. And then, of course, you will need all of the supplies that are in the kit. And the kit also came with a zipper, a number 3 zipper, which is what we're going to use as well. So those are all the supplies that you're going to need to be able to make this pouch. It does come together very quickly once you cut it out, and I will show you how to do that. The trickiest part will be the zipper, but other than that, everything else comes together very, very quickly. So let's talk about the pieces that we need to cut in order to be able to sew. So I've already pre-cut all of the pieces that I need. Once again, in the pattern are the dimensions for all of the pieces. In the kit, once again, we did get, or you would have gotten, a piece of Ankara or Ankara-inspired fabric. One thing I will say is you will need 2 fat quarters, one for the exterior, one for the lining. On my exterior piece, the reason that I say a fat quarter is it doesn't use an entire fat quarter piece of fabric. But on the sample bag that we're going to do today, I wanted to show you why you should use a fat quarter. So as you can see, my little gold ripples go up and down or vertically. But on our second piece that I cut, they go horizontal. So one is going to be for the front, one's going to be for the back. If you have directional fabric, you're going to need to cut your material in a way so that the direction is in the direction of your print. The other thing is if you want to go both pieces going side to side or horizontally, you can cut them the same way. So that's why I say directional fabric. If you have a fabric that is just random and there is no direction, then you will use less than 1 fat quarter's worth of material. I also have cotton, and this is cotton, by the way. This is Ankara inspired, but it is cotton. You're also going to need 2 pieces, one for the front, one for the back for the lining. And these are 2 separate pieces. You will need a bottom piece, and you will need, I ask you to get a 9-inch zipper. This one happens to be zipper by the yard, so there are no metal ends. If you have buying it from a local store and it actually has a little metal pieces on either end, make sure to move your zipper pull to the middle and then just cut off those metal pieces so they do not get away from you. So the zipper pull does not get away. You're also going to need a piece of 2x2 fabric, which we are going to use for the little zipper tab in here. And I don't know, hopefully you can see that right there. There's a zipper tab piece there, and I usually start out with a 2x2 piece of fabric and then I trim it down. We will also be trimming down the zipper as well. So if you can get a 9-inch zipper, then that gives us plenty of room. Once you cut off the ends, then you'll have plenty of room to play with it. We're going to work with that zipper. All right. So once you have all those pieces, then you can cut out, you can come back. When it comes to interfacing the pieces, I use a stiff interfacing, which is why I use the DLH2010. And it does give it a little bit more rigidity than a standard like SF101 or my actual light, DLH2010 light. And so I do want the stiffness because once the bag is completed and we pop out the bottom of the bag, so we push out that bottom piece of the bag, it should be able to stand on its own. So that's why we need the rigidity. If you're using waterproof canvas, however, you do not need to interface it with anything. So if you're using cotton, I recommend that you interface it with a woven interface. So I do not recommend Deco Bond. I recommend a woven interface for this. I am using a heavy interface on this piece of fabric, and because it's cotton and because I want that stiffness so when it stands on its own. All right. So the first thing we're going to start with is our zipper. So we're going to put everything else to the side, excuse me, and we're going to start with the zipper. When it comes to the zipper, the pull should stay in the middle until I tell you that we're ready to turn our zipper right side out. So there's a number of ways that you can do this zipper. I'm going to try to show you one way, but there are multiple ways. Keep in mind that everything that I show you is transferable for any other bags that you want. So I like to say I like to teach transferable skills. And so in doing that, I want to make sure that I just show you one way, and in another one of my videos, you may see me do it a totally different way. Because this is beginner friendly, I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So what you should do is you should cut off the metal pieces if you have it. This is zipper by the yard. There are no metal pieces. I don't need to do that. Make sure that your end that you're going to start with is a straight edge. I can actually see over here that this is not straight over here. So I'm just going to take, and I know people are screaming, but I'm going to take my rotary cutter and I'm just going to straighten that out. All right. Now my pull, if you look at it, my pull, when I pull it up, it closes, and when I pull it down, it opens. All right, so I pull it up, it closes, down, it opens. So I'm going to the end where it opens. So it opens, I'm going at the end where it closes. So at the end where it closes, I'm just going to open it here a little bit. So I open it about maybe 1.5 inches or so because I need to work with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a 45-degree angle with the edge of my zipper. The way that I do that is I take my zipper, I fold it, I push up at the bottom and fold the back underneath. So I basically fold it on itself. And I make it it'll look like that when you're done, okay? Once again, I just take the corner piece, fold it down and to the back, and then I push the top piece up. What's going to happen is that edge over here should meet the other edge. All right, so we're going to do that again. I'm just going to you can take a pin or a clip at this point, and I'm just going to clip this right here to hold it in place. We're going to do that move again. I start with the straight edge. I'm just going to grab the corner. I'm pinching it here at about maybe 1 inch. Maybe 1 inch. And I'm going to fold it in towards me. So I'm folding it in towards me. When I do that, you will see that this puckers a little bit. That's perfectly fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this edge at the top with the side edge. So when I do that and I rotate it, what you will see is that it actually aligns with the edge. I'm then going to take a clip or a pin and I'm going to clip this in place. Now you can hand stitch this, so you can whip stitch it if you would like. So when I do this, you'll now see that they're both folded at an angle, right? So I folded it down at a 90-degree angle. That it makes a 90-degree. Now what you can is you can hand stitch this in place. So you can hand stitch it down so that it's in place to hold it. I put clips. You can actually also add a pin if it makes it easier. What we're going to do now is we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're actually going to tack it down along the edge. I'll explain to you how to do it so that you make sure that you keep that 90-degree angle. So I'm going to switch over now to the sewing machine. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have these clipped, and you can see they are clipped. And I want to make sure that when I go down with my needle, I'm actually going down about 1/8 of an inch from this edge. And I want to catch, it'll be 3 layers of fabric. So it's the 2 pieces that are folded on themselves and then the back piece. You can open your zipper wider if you need to. I'm going to hold this with my finger and then watch your finger so that you don't poke yourself. And like I said, I've done this a couple of times. If it's easier for you, you can put a pin in here. So I'm going to go get a straight pin. I don't really have them because I'm a bag maker and I don't keep straight pins around normally. But let me grab one here for you so that I can show you. All right. So I'm going to grab this straight pin and I'm going to stick it right down through 3 layers. And I'm just going to twist it back up. Okay. So now that's what it's going to look like. Hopefully you can see it. The light isn't as good over here as it is over there, but there you go. All right. So you can see that pin going right in there. You can do the same for this side. I actually, like I said, I'm used to doing this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put this underneath our presser foot. We're going to take our needle. Do not drop the presser foot down yet. Take your needle and stick it right into your zipper where it's folded here, about 1/8 of an inch away. So I'm not dropping my presser foot yet. I'm going to drop my needle first. So I'm going to lower my needle about 1/8 of an inch. Once my needle is in all 3 of those layers, I can then remove my pin because it will hold it in place. So I remove the pin. You can see it's holding it in place. I will then drop my presser foot. And then I will stitch forward and backwards a couple of times to tack that angle in. What I will say to you is that you should go forward first and then go backwards. If you go backwards first, you'll tend to dislodge the angle at which I'm trying to keep, which is that 90-degree angle. I am using a stitch length of about 3.5 to do this. So I'm going to go forward first, a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to back stitch right over those stitches and over the edge. Now I am using a polyester zipper. For these zippers, or a metal zipper, just be careful when you do this because you do not want to break a needle as you're sewing. So I'm going to cut this thread. And I'm going to snip it, just clean it up a little bit. I'll go clean it up when I go back to my sewing, my cutting mat. A little bit more. Okay? So now once I've done that, you can see that I've tacked that down. I have my 90-degree angle. Once you've done one, you should be able to do the other side. Once again, if you need to use a pin, use a pin. With your presser foot in the up position, you're going to lower your needle. Watch your finger under here. Don't lower the needle through your finger. Lower it till it's through the 3 layers. Remove your pin if you have used one. And then what you're going to do is lower your presser foot. Once again, we're going to sew forward first, and then we're going to back stitch. Okay? You're going to cut your thread, and then you're going to pull it out. So now we have both of these pieces. Excuse me. We have both of these pieces at a 90-degree angle, and we're ready to go on to the next step. I'm going to switch back to the cutting mat. And I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup here on my zipper. I like to cut those threads so they're not hanging out. All right, and we're ready for the next step. So when we look at our piece that we have, and I'm going to take the exterior, it doesn't really matter because they're both the same width, right? We can see that it is the same. It started out the same size as this, and now it's a little bit shorter because I folded down those ends. So the next thing we're going to do is we want to make sure that our zipper is 1.5 inches smaller than the width of our side. So if you take your side, you're going to cut the zipper down, and I tell you in the directions how much to cut it down. And we need it smaller so that when we put it in there, it's not hitting the edges or hitting any seams. Okay? So I'm going to cut this down 1.5 inches smaller. That's assuming that I remember how big this was. Okay? And then I'm going to come back and show you. So we're going to cut this down 1.5 inches smaller. So now my zipper is 1.5 inches smaller. So now if you look at it, you can see that it's smaller than it was. This was the piece that I cut off over here. All right. So now we have to put a tab on the end. So we're going to go out and we're going to get our little piece of fabric that we have. Now that tab piece does not need to be interfaced. All right, so it's not interfaced at all. It's just, like I said, I like to use usually a 2 by 2. You can definitely use a little bit smaller. 2 by 2 is usually a very good size to use because whether I'm using a number 5 or a number 3 zipper, as in this case, it works perfectly, and then I just trim it down to what I need. So I'm going to make this 2 by 2. All right. And then what I do is I actually, I can play with it. So what I do is I fold this in half like this. I finger press it or press it with my fingernails. Let's put this to the side. I finger press it with my fingernails. And then what I do is I open it up. I fold the raw edges to the middle. So I fold one raw edge to the middle, like that. And then I fold the other raw edge just shy of the middle. And I'll explain to you why. The reason I do that is because if you fold them both to the middle, what happens is when you're stitching with the zipper, sometimes you don't catch the back. So I will show you this. And I did it a little bit exaggerated so that I can actually show you better. So if you look at this, what you will see is the back piece is longer than the front piece. I'm going to stitch on the front piece and I'm guaranteed to catch the back piece. So that way I don't have to worry. If you do it where they're even, sometimes if the back is a little bit shorter, you don't catch it. So when you turn over your zipper, you can see it. In this case, it won't really matter as much because it's on the inside of the bag, but I always like to do it about 1/8 of an inch shy of the back, of the front, so that the back piece, I know that I'm always catching it. So I'm just pressing this down. All right. The next thing you're going to do is take your zipper and your zipper tab, and you're going to slide your zipper all the way in. So you're going to slide it all the way in. So remember I said to you, I like to make it bigger because that way if I need room, I always have room. And it should be touching the back. The other thing that's nice is when you do this, you can actually see that there's a little bit of an overhang in the back. So hopefully you can see that. There's a little bit in the back over here. There's a little bit of an overhang back here. So when I stitch this, it'll catch the back. Okay? So now we're going to take our zipper, we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, if you're a beginner and 1/8 of an inch is hard for you, you can sew at 1/4 of an inch, and that's totally fine. We just want to make sure that we sew the zipper in between the two layers. So let's go to the sewing machine. I'm still using that stitch length of 3. And I'm going to sew at 1/8 of an inch. I start off the zipper only because I have all this extra fabric anyway. And then I'm just going to sew right along the edge on the front, 1/8 of an inch. I will back tack when I get onto the zipper, just one stitch, and then I'll just keep going. Make sure to keep that zipper straight as it goes through the machine. Back tack again, and then keep going. And then cut your thread. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our cutting mat, and all I'm going to simply do is trim this so that it's totally flush with my zipper. So I'm just going to cut this so it's totally flush with the zipper. So I don't need that extra fabric. I'm just going to cut that right off. Okay. Now, once I've done that, I've completed my zipper. I'm going to set my zipper to the side. Now we're going to start constructing our actual pouch. So I will need my exterior fabric first, and I will need my bottom. So I'll need those 3 pieces first. I always like to fold my fabric in half, and I mark my center. So I take a little snip. You can actually put a pen mark. The reason that I take a little snip is because if I do a pen mark, I can't see it on the front and the back. Whereas if I take a little snip. Now let's be very careful with the snip. I'll show you here what I did right there in the middle where my hand is. You see that little nick? It's right here. It's very small. It's about 1/8 of an inch. Don't make a big one because if you do that, you'll see it when you put your bag together. So I take it ever so slightly, V-cut, snip right here. I take a little V, cut right here. And then you can see my little snip right there. Okay? I do that for the front and the back as well. of the exterior pieces. Once again, these have been interfaced. If you want, you can put, you can use a marking tool and mark it with a marking tool. But once again, I take the snips because I like to see it on the front and the back. Now, I will say to you, the pouch is wider than it is taller. So make sure when you're doing this, you are looking at the width of it and not the height of it, right? Because it's wider than it is taller. Okay? So now I've done that. I've matched everything up. Just to keep myself sane, I have also marked the back, and I've put the word top, so I know which one's the top and which one's the bottom. That way it also makes sure that when I'm sewing together, I'm not sewing it this way. And that, remember I said it's wider than it is taller. Okay, so now we have that, and now we have the bottom. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of our pieces. It doesn't matter the front or the back. I'm taking my front. When this is done, this will be my front. And this is the direction. So look at your fabric. This is the direction that I want my fabric to be when I'm done. I'm going to take my bottom piece and I'm going to put it right side down. So this is right side up. I'm going to put my bottom piece right side down so that these two pieces are right sides together. I'm going to align those notches that I made, and I'm going to add a clip. As a bag maker, we get used to using clips because as we use different materials, especially like vinyl or leather, we don't want to put holes in it that are very difficult to get out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm sorry, I'm going to sew this, apologies, at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance going down the edge. So we'll talk about the seam allowance when I get there a little bit more. So let's go to the sewing machine. Now for me, 1/4 of an inch is actually the edge of my sewing foot. So over here is 1/4 of an inch for me. So I like to use that. You may see some other patterns written by other designers where they use 3/8 of an inch. I use 1/4. It's only because it makes it easier when you're teaching people who are beginners to sew it together. It's easier to tell them just sew it along the edge as opposed to them trying to figure out on the plate where to line up. So I will back tack at the beginning and at the end. I like to put my needle down first. I'm going to take out my clips and I'm going to sew all along the bottom at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. 1/4 of an inch using a seam allowance of 3.5. All right, so now I've sewn that in at 1/4 of an inch. You can see that. And if I flip it over, that's what the bottom looks like. So let's go back to the cutting mat. So now we have our back piece. You want to make sure, and I'm just going to finger press this down. So that's the seam over here, and I'm just finger pressing it down like this for right now. I'm then going to take my back piece. I can see how it lines up because you see that one's too short. So I'm going to rotate it once again. Make sure that the top is pointing to the top, right? So when I do this, it says top, I'm going to flip it over. This is still the top. I'm then going to take my bottom piece, right sides down, match up those little notches at the bottom, and I'm going to clip them in place. Excuse me, I have the sneezels. Okay. So now that I have that lined up, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to stitch at 1/4 of an inch, with a stitch length of 3. So 1/4 of an inch seam allowance with a stitch length of 3. So let's go back to the sewing machine. I'm going to back tack at the beginning and at the end. Okay, so now we've done the front and the back. So now we've done both pieces, and this is what it's going to look like. So far, if I were to stand this up, it kind of looks like our pouch already. Before we go on to the next step, however, we're going to need to add our zipper onto this piece. Now, the reason that we're adding the zipper onto the piece is because once we start constructing the lining, we want it all to be one piece together, and it'll be flat, and it's easier to construct that way. So what I'm going to do is I've marked the center here of my piece, and I need to align the center of my zipper. Now, I like to use double-sided tape. I do not use pins for this either, because I find that pins will distort the material. So I'm going to take my double-sided tape, and I am going to put it, and this is 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape. I'm going to put it the full length of my zipper. So you may notice that your zipper does have a little wavy in the middle where the zipper pull is, and I'll show you that. So if you're looking at it, when you get to where the zipper pull is over here, you may notice that there's a little bit of a wave that happens. What I do is when I'm laying down my double-sided tape, I lay it down as close to where that zipper pull is, and then I will pull the zipper pull up a little bit so that my zipper becomes flat, and it makes it easier to lay the tape down. Once I have it laid and it's flat, I can then take the zipper and pull it back the other direction. All right, because I know it's where it needs to be, and then I will continue down here like that. So this is 1/8 of an inch. Double-sided tape comes in different widths, so it can come in 1/8 of an inch. It could come also in 1/4 of an inch, an inch. So they come in different widths. I like 1/8 of an inch for zippers. This is a low tack double-sided tape. It's actually a scrapbooking tape that I use, and so it's readily available at any craft store. One thing you want to make sure is that when you're using a double-sided tape, that it's not very sticky. It's sticky enough to do what you need to do, but not so sticky that it gums up your machine. The other way that I want to mention to you that you can deal with that wavy that I was telling you about, remember I said that you'll get the little wave, is to pull your zipper completely closed. So if you pull it completely closed, it's totally flat. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same on the other side. Add a piece of double-sided tape. And I use 1/8 of an inch because my seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch. Yes, it's in the seam allowance. However, because it's low tack, I don't worry about it. I mean, it's not very sticky. But I also know at 1/8 of an inch, by using a 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape, what will happen is you will not see it once I'm done. There's nothing worse than you finishing, and then you can actually see the tape after you're done. All right. So now we're going to get our piece with our piece with the double-sided tape on it, and we're going to get our exterior piece. I'm going to start, now it doesn't really matter how you open your zipper. I'm right-handed, so I open from right to left. If you're left-handed, you may want to turn the zipper around so that you're opening the zipper from left to right, okay? I think what's happening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to turn my camera around a little bit, only because my right and your right are two different rights, right? So I want to make sure that I'm telling you guys the right thing and that you're visually seeing it, the way that I'm seeing it. So I'm going to just flip this around real quick so that we're looking at it from the same same direction. Please hold. Okay. Okay. So now we're where we need to be. So if you're right-handed, it's like this, right? I'm right-handed, so this is the right side for me. I open things this way. If you're left-handed and you open things with your left hand, you can flip your zipper around so the opening or the pull is over here, and when you pull it this way, it opens. That's one thing nice about making your own bag, is that you can do these little simple modifications. So the next thing I'm going to do is I have my zipper right side up. This is the teeth, side up. I'm going to need to flip it down like this so I can see the wrong side of the zipper. Before I do that, I want to know what the center of my zipper is. So I'm going to fold my zipper in half. Now you can put a little crease if you want to. I'm actually just going to put a little snip. Make sure not to exceed your double-sided tape, because you just need to see it enough that you could line it up with your notch. And you're going to do that on this side. And you're going to do it on the opposite side, because we have to do the opposite side as well. So turn your zipper over so you'll have two little notches. And the paper or the double-sided tape is a good way of knowing. So just don't exceed that, and you know your notches are big enough. So I'll bring that up so you can see it. Okay? So I open things right to left. Right side up, which is where I put my tape on the right side. Right side up for my fabric. This is going to be my front of my fabric. Down here I have the bottom, and then over here will be the back. Okay? I'm then going to take my zipper. I'm going to peel off the double-sided tape backing. So I peel off the backing, so all I have is a double-sided tape. I'm then going to fold it over just like this and match up those notches, because then I know that it's the center. All right? And you're going to match up the edges. So you're going to match up not just this, but you're going to match up the edges. Now, what I will say to you is if you want to put clips in here to hold it in place temporarily, you can. The tape will hold it. Once you press it down, the tape does hold your zipper in place, but you can put clips. I would tell you not to, or try not to put pins, because when you put a pin, it creates like a little bump in it, but not to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to base stitch in the zipper before we put in the lining, because we want to make sure that it's exactly where we need it to be. I would go back and measure both edges and make sure that the edges of the zipper are at the same point. So in other words, they're in from the edge the same amount. Don't get crazy about it. If it's, it's good enough, right? If it's 1/8 of an inch off, it's totally fine. That's why I marked the center. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine. Remember, this is the wrong side of the zipper, right side of the fabric. This is our front. I'm going to stitch straight across, and I'm going to back tack, even though it's a basting stitch, all the way to the end on the sewing machine. So let's go to the sewing machine. All right. So now what we're going to do, now for some of you, that zipper pull over here may be in the way. So you can hold the zipper down, pull the zipper pull down, and then as we sew, we can pull it back up, all right? I'm going to base stitch it. For me is 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on the longest stitch on your sewing machine. So turn your sewing machine stitch length to the longest stitch. And then I'm just going to base stitch it 1/8 of an inch all the way down. And yes, I'm going to back tack. Be careful when you go over the start, those little zipper teeth at the beginning. Just be a little bit careful because you don't want to break a needle. So now you can see, I don't know if you can see, I actually cleared the zipper pull over here. But if you're not clearing the zipper pull, with your needle in the down position, lift your presser foot, slide your zipper pull up out of the way, lower your presser foot, and then just continue sewing. And I'm just cutting my thread. You can probably see this one better. but I just stitched a long stitch, right, in case we have to rip it out, of basting, and it's the longest stitch on my sewing machine. So I'm going to go back to the cutting mat. Okay, so now we're here at the cutting mat. I've base stitched my zipper in, but the next thing I need to do is I need to put my lining down on top of this. Once again, that's the top. I've marked the top of my lining. This is just one of them, right? I've marked the top. I'm going to put this right sides together. So it's the right side of my lining with the right side of my exterior fabric. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to fold it in half and mark the centers with that little stitch, that little snip, or once again, you can use a marking tool, an erasable marking tool, or a pencil. I like to do it with the snip. Okay. So while I'm at it, I'm going to do the same with this one as well. And once again, I'll just hold this up. A little bit of snip. Remember, if you make it too big, you're going to see it. Okay. So I'll just put this to the side. So I will line up these centers just like this. What you can do, if you want to and you don't want to put clips in again, you can take another piece of double-sided tape. You can add it to the back of your zipper. Just like that. All right, back of your zipper, just like that. You can then peel off the backing. So double-sided tape is good for a lot of different uses. Peel off the backing. I can then take my lining piece, start with the center, line them up. Just like that, and stick it down. Now this part is going to be a little bit trickier. The fact that we're using a number 3 zipper actually helps. If you're using a number 5 zipper, you may have to move that pull out of the way. Now if you want to, you may, once again, add clips. But now I've put on my lining piece, right sides together with my exterior. And that's the exterior front. And that's what it's going to look like when you're done. So we're going to once again go back to the sewing machine. This time we're going to use a seam allowance of 3.5, our original seam allowance, and a 1/4 inch seam to sew this together. So this is going to be permanent. So let's go to the sewing machine. 3.5 inch seam allowance. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch, 3.5 inch, 3 stitches, a stitch length of 3 and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember I said for me, my 1/4 inch is the edge of my presser foot. I will also say to you, if you have pulled your zipper pull all the way up to the top, so mine was, it's actually right here at the bottom. I had it at the top. I pulled it down so it was out of the way. So we may have to pull it down again when we get to it. We'll see how it works out. But if you get to it, when you get right there, don't try to sew around it, because what will happen is it'll make your stitches wave. So stop, needle into down position, lift up your presser foot, move it up out of the way. And I'll do it so that I can show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to back tack at the beginning of the end. I'm coming to my zipper pull. I'm not going to keep going. I'm going to lift my lining piece. And before I do that, make sure your needle's in the down position. Lift your presser foot. Lift your lining piece. I can see my zipper pull is right here. I'm going to pull it up out of the way, all the way. I'm then going to lay my piece flat again, lower my presser foot, and then continue to stitch all the way to the end. And remember to back tack. So now I've sewn this piece on. So let's go back to the cutting mat. So as you can see, everything's coming together, but it's coming together in a flat way. So you should have everything totally flat when you're done, okay? There will come a time when everything will fold up on itself and it won't be flat, but for right now, these pieces should be flat. So now that we've sewn on this one piece, this other piece is going to need to be sewn on here. Okay? This is where we're now making a little like cocoon of our piece. So what I want to do is before I do that, I'm going to take my lining piece, I'm going to fold it up, fold your seam allowance away, so towards the lining. And we're going to undersew this, right? So we're going to do this, and we're going to sew on the lining at 1/8 of an inch. And that's so that when we're finished, our zipper actually pops up a little bit out of the bag. And I'll show you what it looks like on the regular bag or the regular pouch. So if you look at the pouch, it may be a little bit hard to see, but you can see it pops up. So, and that's because I'm top stitching under the zipper, which pushes the zipper up. So we're just going to top stitch that. I'm not going to change my stitch length. I'm just going to do it at 1/8 of an inch on the sewing machine. So let's go back to the sewing machine and do that. I will say to you, for me, 1/8 of an inch, and you can actually fold up your material, by the way, and just underneath the throat of your sewing machine. So in here, you can just fold it up. 1/8 of an inch for me is the inside edge of my presser foot. And so that's where my 1/8 is. I'm not going to change my stitch length. Normally you would, but I'm just going to leave it the same 3.5 inches, and I'm just going to sew at 1/8 of an inch. When I'm sewing, I do pull outward, so in opposite direction, to get that as flat as possible. All right, and I have completed, if you can see it, I've completed that top stitch. And I'll show you when I get back, but it's right there. So let's go back to the cutting mat. I can show you the top stitching. I actually use gray thread. I don't use white. And I use gray thread because white is very stark gray, you can hardly see. And I use it pretty much for everything, a medium gray thread. So now that I've done that, if you remembered how we did the first part of the zipper, we're going to do the second part of the zipper the same way. Before I put the zipper on, though, I am going to add my tag. So remember I said in the kit there was a tag. So I'm going to get my little tag that says, it says nothing at this point. It says, "Hey, good looking." And I'm just going to get one of those tags, and I'm going to add it at this point. So I try to add my tags before I sew everything up when I remember it. Sometimes I forget and I have to open a seam, but I try to do it when I remember it. It doesn't really matter. This is a double-sided tag, so it doesn't really matter which side you put it on, when you're sewing it in. When I sew my tag in, I try to go like a little bit, like 1/8 of an inch outside of the edge, and then I tack it down with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to clip that right now to show you what I'm talking about. So I just tack it down to the edge. You can also do this on the inside. So if you don't want it on the outside, you can put it on the inside or on the lining side, and then it'll be inside your bag. So what I do is when I sew it down here, I'm about 1/8 of an inch with this label over, and I'm going to tack it down at 1/8 of an inch. So therefore I have like 1/4 of an inch. And then when I sew it in, I'm sewing it in at 1/4 of an inch. So by the time I'm finished, I would have sewn it in using about 3/4 of an inch. But I don't like it at the very edge because it's easy to pull out sometimes. So I try to go like 1/8 of an inch. So I am going to tack this down. I'm going to use a regular stitch length because it is where I want it to be. I'm not guessing at it, so I don't have to base stitch it. So let's go to the sewing machine and tack that in using a stitch length of 3. And we're just going to base this tag in, or this label in. If you don't have a label, that's fine. Okay, so now you can see I've put it in. All right. So now we can do the next step, which is we can do the next step, which is to come back to the cutting mat. There we go. And I'm going to peel the double-sided tape off of my zipper. I've already marked the center of the zipper and the center of the back. I can peel this off just like that. Take this piece, line up the center, just like that. Easy peasy. The double-sided tape you will find, I know it seems like it's fiddly and it's sticky. It has a benefit, honestly, in that I know it's fiddly, but once you get to the sewing machine, it really, really prevents things from shifting around. So there we go. Okay. So now I have my exterior pieces, right? This is my lining piece, which is flopping around a little bit. You can ignore that for a second. This is the piece that I said if you wanted to put your label on, you would put it on here, and it would be on inside of your bag. I put mine on the outside. And what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch or base stitch down. I always like to base stitch the zipper down using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we're going to back tack at the beginning of the end, and then we're going to come back and we're going to add the other lining piece. So let's do that now. Let's go in and base stitch this in. Base stitching for me, longest stitch on my sewing machine. Once again, 1/8 of an inch. I use the inside of my presser foot, so that inside edge right there of the presser foot, as my 1 inch. I'm sorry, as my 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to start sewing. If you get to the zipper pull and it's in the way, remember with the needle in the down position, lift up your presser foot, move the zipper pull out of the way, and then lower your presser foot and continue sewing. So if it gets in the way, you can do that. Okay, so I've now stitched that in, base stitched it in the longest length. So let's go back to the cutting mat. All right, so we're almost there. So we have one lining, the exterior and the front and the back exterior, and one lining piece. So we are missing a lining piece. So this is my lining piece, and we are missing that. So what I want to do is I want to put that with the lining right side up, just like this. I'm going to get my other lining piece. I'm going to put it right side down on top of the lining, but I'm going to align it with my zipper at the top here, like this. So that I don't have to worry about slipping once again, I add another piece of double-sided tape to that edge. Just like that. I peel the backing off. And if it doesn't come off, just put it back down and press it hard a little bit and then do it again. I'm then going to align my centers. So I'm aligning the edges, but I'm aligning the center. Make sure that, I don't know if you can see, I'll show you. I know that that's the top because I marked it with the top. So when your material's face down, you can't always see that. So I know that it's facing the right way. And I'm going to press real hard. You can add clips along the edge if you want to, but that's what it should look like once it's taped in there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch it with a stitch length of 3 and at a 1/4 inch seam allowance because we're now putting it in permanently. So we're going to go to the sewing machine. Once again, you may have to move your zipper pull out of the way. If you do, and I know that I'll remind you what to do. So I repeat this over and over again, and I know it seems like, oh, you just said that, but people forget, and I'm gearing myself towards a beginner bag maker, not somebody who has more experience, and so that's why I repeat myself. So make sure your stitch length is at 3, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and back tack at the beginning and the end. So I am approaching my zipper pull down here. You can see the little ball sticking out. I'm going to stick my hand in there. Make sure that my needle's down. Lift the presser foot and then slide that zipper all the way past my zipper, my needle. So my zipper pull now is back here somewhere. Lower my presser foot. Make sure nothing's come out of alignment over here. And just continue to sew. Okay, so let's go back to the cutting mat. So now what you can see is that we have all of our pieces together, right? We have our 2 lining pieces. We have our exterior pieces. And now we're ready to just put everything together and sew everything up and we'll be done. So before we do that, what we want to do is, remember how we top stitched this side? We need to top stitch this side as well. So this will be a little bit tricky. So what you're going to need to do is open your zipper all the way. So open it all the way you can. You're going to fold your seam allowance down under your lining. So we're going to fold it and then we're going to flip the lining down and then we're going to press it with our finger, just like that. So this would be a little tricky because we have more material here and everything's attached, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to, 1/8 inch, we're going to top stitch this down along that edge. So just, you can finger press it. You don't have to iron it. You can finger press it. This is cotton. If it's something else that you think you need to get a little stiffer seam on it. But you'll see that my seam allowance is pointing down away from my zipper. And then I'm flipping my lining over that. So I'm going to do 1/8 inch seam allowance on this along the lining side. So now somebody says to me, well, why do you do 1/8 inch here and not like a 1/4 inch? It's because 1/8 inch will catch that seam allowance. That's another reason that I do it at 1/8 inch. Okay? So now we have those pieces together. The next thing we're going to do is we want to create a boxed corner down here. So to create a boxed corner, I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to make my box corner. In the directions it tells you how big to make this corner. It's actually going to be 1.5 inches. So I will tell you that. I will get a pen or a pencil or something to mark this with. And so I'm going to do 1.5 inches at And this is on the lining side. So I'm doing this on the lining side, these corners. So I like drawing it with a pencil. I don't just cut, like I could just cut with a rotary cutter or a scissor, but I don't like doing that. I like measuring, you know, the whole measure twice, cut once. Make sure I have it totally right the way that I want it. So I'm measuring in, just, you know, I'm measuring in from the edge 1.5 inches, and I'm measuring up 1.5 inches. So that means it'll be an 1.5 inches square all the way around. So once I've done that, I am going to cut out that corner. So I'm going to come back here. And remember, this is on the lining. So you should be doing this on the lining. You're going to cut out the corners. So when you're done on both of your lining pieces, you should have 2 boxes in the lower corners, right and left. So you'll have boxes. All right. So this is on the lining piece. It's not on the other piece. Okay. So now I think we're ready. I could be wrong. But I think we're right. So what we want to do is we're going to turn our bag or our pouch through the bottom. I would say to you, I try to leave it as big as my hand is so I can fit my hand in there. If you feel you can make it smaller, then do. I normally just take like my 4 fingers, and that's how I mark, right? I line up the middle here with the middle mark here, close my hand, and then I just put a mark at the bottom with a pencil on my lining, because that's really where I'm going to need the opening. And I just need room to stick my hand in. So if you do this, for me, it ends up being about a 4-inch wide opening, which is 2 inches to the left of the center and 2 inches to the right. If you feel you need a little bit more, you can give yourself a 1/4 inch more on either side. And these are going to be the start and stop of your pieces. Okay? So I'm just going to show you this, right? This is going to be the start. So I'm going to start at this point here, go all the way around to the other side, across the bottom, to the other side, just up to the edge, and then stop. You're going to then start here. You're going to go all the way around here, go to the top, and stop. So we're not going to sew around because our bottom is already on. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to start here, sew around our piece, and then we're going to come back after we've done that to the other side. Hope that makes sense. All right. So to make our life easier, or to show you how we make that bottom, I'm going to take my piece at the bottom, right? This is the lining. This is the exterior. I'm going to line up where the bottom meets, right here, right? Where the bottom piece meets the exterior of the fabric. And I'm going to take my lining, I'm going to flip one up and one down. And then I'm going to add a clip. We're going to come back to this. I'm going to add a clip. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Line up where the seam is, where the bottom meets the lining, and make sure you flip in the same direction, right? So this one was flipped down, So I'm going to flip this one towards the top, which is down, and the other one in the opposite direction. So that's known as nesting, and I'm going to put a clip. Just like that. All right, and then I'm going to flatten it out like that. Now, the way that we get that very nice bottom on our bag is we're going to take this bottom piece, this piece here that we can't see here, that is actually our exterior. This is the bottom. I'm going to take that bottom and because I flipped this side down towards the exterior, I'm going to flip the whole bottom in that direction, even the seam. So I'm going to flip everything over in that direction, just like that. So I'm flipping everything over. Hopefully you can see it. I'm taking this. This is the exterior bottom. This is the exterior front and back. Where the seam is, I'm just going to flip it at that seam point right over, just like that. Right? So those seams will be sitting on top of each other. I'm going to move my clip, and then I'm going to put the clip right back in, right there. So I flipped my entire bottom over towards the lining. Okay? Your bottom exterior here is still at the bottom for you. I'm going to do the same on this side. Remove my clip right where the seam is, I'm going to flip on that seam line all the way over, including the back piece seam, and I'll put the clip right there. So that's what it's going to look like. This side I have nothing. This side I have my entire bottom right here. Okay. It doesn't really matter, but if you want to do the rest of it, you can. You don't have to because we're not sewing this. Because we're just going to sew down this way across the bottom and stop at those lines. We can go the other way also, which I mentioned earlier. You know, we could start here and go around, or we could start up there and go down. It's up to you. I'm then going to take my side seams here where my my lining meets this, and I'm going to clip those. So I'm going to match them up. I'm not going to nest them. I'm just going to match them up. It's going to be difficult to nest them because we stitched down. We stitched it down, the seam allowance. So we're just going to line them up. And then we're going to do the same with the bottom. Once again, it doesn't matter when we sew this, and I'll say this again, it doesn't matter which way. What I will say to you is while we're doing this, open your zipper. Some people say halfway. I open it the whole way. It's up to you. You can open it halfway. I find that when I open it halfway, I normally have to reach in there and open it the rest of the way once I'm done, but it's up to you. Opening it halfway keeps the shape. So I'm just adding clips all along this edge to keep it together as I sew. Okay, those notches or box corners should be even. If they're not, you can snip them around so that they're a little bit even. If you cut off a little bit, then that's fine. All right. Now, I'm going to backstitch at the start and the stop. It's very important, especially around this opening, that you backstitch, because when you go to pull the bag through it, what's going to happen is if you don't backstitch, it'll rip it wider. So what we want to do is make sure that we backstitch at the start and the stop. I also backstitch once I get up here to the top. Given that this is the thickest point, you could start up here and go down. I'm just going to start down here and go up. But if you're concerned, start up here is the thickest point, and then you don't have to worry about the hump. So I'll do it one way for one side, and I'll do it another way for the other side so you can see the difference. So the first way I'm going to do it is I'm going to start by stitching from the bottom around to the top. And then when I stitch the other side, I'll show you what it looks like when it comes to the thickness. So I normally start with the thickest point first, but it's up to you how you want to do it. Okay? So I'm going to start at the bottom for one side right now. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine. At the sewing machine, I am using a stitch length of 3, and I will be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. So I'm going to start on the little line that I drew. I drew a line here. It says start. I'm going to start there and I'm going to back tack. I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch in, stitch length of 3, and I'm going to stitch forward and back. Now, when you get to the end, it's totally okay to go off of the edge, but what I will say is stop about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch before you get to the edge. So that's really where we want to stop. So I'm going to stop right there. It's about, for me, it's about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to take this other piece that I have. I'm going to fold it. So I'm going to pull it back like this, and I'm going to fold it in so that the edge of my presser foot, I'm trying to get my hand out the way here, the edge of my presser foot aligns with the side of my piece. Now this becomes important because you're going to create a string that will make your box corners look even better. So if you do that, you'll have really nice box corners. So we're going to just keep sewing right across that opening, and then we're going to sew down the side. I do like to back tack over where this seam is, just to make it a little bit more sturdy. And then you can just continue sewing. So now here goes the thickness part. So I'm showing you one way where it's very thick, and then we'll come back and I'll show you the other way where you start here and then you go down. So I'm just going to get my awl, just because I want to hold these pieces down without putting my fingers under there. And I'm going to sew. And then I will back tack. Okay? So that's one way, right? One way was I started at the bottom here and I sewed around. Now I'm going to do it the other way. And then you can decide for yourself which one you like. So I'm going to start where the thickness is, which is up here at the top. I put my needle down. I'm going to go forward and then back, right? Because I'm going to back tack. Once again, when I get to this seam right here that I have, I'm going to back stitch across that just to reinforce it. When I get to about 1/4 of an inch over here, I will take my bottom piece, rotate it around. Make sure that your lining pieces are together here. You don't want to leave one behind, so make sure they're together. Take my lining pieces, stick it right underneath. So rotate your piece around. Make sure that the fabric and the edge of your presser foot, or whatever your stitch allowance is totally vertical, right? So they should be in alignment. And then you're going to keep sewing. When you get to the stop, or where you drew the stop or start at over here, you're going to back tack. And then just cut your thread. So let's go back to the cutting mat. And this is what you should have, right? So I'm not doing where I tell you to do the corners, you know, you're going to do this, then box the corner. You're going to have that little peak of a corner, they're going to have that little string. There's a little string in there because we attached it. So what you're going to do is, I like to start in the middle. I pull this out open because I want to get my lining pieces. These are the lining pieces with the box corner are. I want to be able to pull them apart. So that's my opening where I'm going to turn it towards. These are my corners. You'll notice because I did that string, see how it holds it all together? I can then pinch my corners and I can nest my seam. So I'm going to put one seam allowance to the left, one to the right. It doesn't really matter which is which. One to the left, one to the right. Pull it, pull it, pull it till it creates like a straight line in here. I put a clip in the middle. You can put clips on either side. I usually don't, but it should be a straight line when you're done. Okay, we're going to do the same with the other side. But it makes it that much easier because when you pull it, the thread actually helps you, that little string. So that's just a little tip. We're going to do this. Push one seam to the left, one to the right, whichever way you want to do it, and put a clip right in the middle. You can put a clip on either side if you'd like. That's up to you. We're now going to go back to the sewing machine because this is what it looks like now. And we're going to sew our corners. So we're just going to sew a straight line across our corners to close up those corners. We're not closing the opening because that's what we're going to turn our bag through. Okay? So let's go to the sewing machine. So now I'm back here. Just going to get some light. So it's kind of a little bright over here. Let's try to get it a little less bright. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to sew a straight line. So just try to keep this as straight as possible. It shouldn't bow or curve in. It should be a straight line. And I back tack at the corner, so hopefully you can see. And I'm just going to go same stitch length, 1/4 inch. That's one. And now I'm going to do the other one. Easy peasy. Okay. Okay. So now we've done that. Let's go back to the cutting mat. Okay. I'm going to take out all my clips that I have. You should have sewn this down, right? So when you look at the bottom, it should be sewed down on either side. And then you have your opening. Your zipper should be open. You should be able to stick your hand in there, at least your 4 fingers in there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to pull the bag right side out. So the way that I do this is I actually grab a corner first. If you want to, you can actually cut off a little bit of the corner. I don't do that sometimes because I want that extra reinforcement on the corner. So now what I'm going to do is stick my hand in there, grab that corner, and this will be tight. So I will take that corner and I will poke it down just like that. So I'm just poking it down a little bit. And like I said, I used my 4 fingers, so my hand should really fit in there. And I should be able to grab that corner. So I grab either corner. I don't grab the middle because then everything just gets wadded up. So I got that corner now. And I'm just going to pull it. I'm pulling the corner, but I'm pushing this exterior part with my hand. And what I do is I also twist a little bit and I pull. So this will take a little bit. I know one thing I like about when I make the videos, I don't know about anybody else, I don't take shortcuts. So you can double the speed on this. I should have said that in the beginning. But I don't take shortcuts so that you can see how long it actually takes. And you can, I'm not doing anything. If I make a mistake, I make a mistake. Okay, we're almost there. There we go. All right. And then once I'm done, I could just flip that lining around, just like that. Okay. So now I have my lining. Just take a peek at your corners, your box corner, and you can see how nicely they lined up. And that was because we did that little string trick, and I nested my seams. But you can see how nicely that seam looks. So I'm just going to pull this bag, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten out my bottom. And what you're going to notice is as you straighten this out, it's going to seem kind of weird. You're going to be like, well, what's going on down here, right? It looks kind of odd. And that's going to be on both sides. So you just pull it out as much as you can. Just keep pulling, pulling, pulling. And then what you're going to do, remember I said this lies flat, and that's because that goes like that. See how flat it lies? Before we turn it right side out, what I want to do is I want to close this opening, and then we could talk about how to get that bottom of your bag so that your bag stands up. All right. So I've done that. I'm now going to take my seam and I'm going to fold it under on both sides about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to finger press this 1/4 of an inch on one side of the opening. And 1/4 of an inch on the other side of the opening. Just like that. Now you have a couple of options here. Sometimes, I'll admit it, I put glue. So I just take glue and then stick the two pieces like this together and let it dry. Right, so I'll put like a bead of glue going all the way across. And then I'll just do like this and clip it and let it dry. You can stitch it by hand, right, because this is something that you can use a needle and thread. Or you can do what I'm going to do, which I'm just going to sew it closed. So I'm just going to pinch this together like this. Nobody's looking on the inside of your bags, guys. I've gone and looked inside of bags, and I've seen where nobody whip stitched it. They just did this. And they did this either here or they did it on the side seam. So if you think that it has to be, just so, it really doesn't. You can just do this, and you can stitch this at 1/8 of an inch across, and I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew that. Now you could have put clips in it. I'm not going to. I'm just going to sew this across. And I don't necessarily go all the way to the end, so I don't do this and go all the way to the end at 1/4 of an inch. I just sew the opening. If you want to make it look more uniform, you can go all the way to the end over here where the seam meets. But I don't. I just sew the opening closed. I will back tack. I will say to you, nobody should be looking inside your bag. So I don't think anybody's going to be in there looking to see how you sewed it closed. But if you want to, you absolutely can hand stitch it closed. All right, so now I'm going to take this and I'm just going to shove the lining back inside the bag. And I'm going to pop that zipper tab up. So there's that zipper tab that's there. I'm going to just pop that up and out. And then I'm going to just stick the lining back in there. All right. You can take, and I have done, a scissor. Okay, hold on. Let me just refresh my camera here a little bit. It got locked out of alignment. I think it's just me. Okay. I take a scissor, or you take a knitting needle, and I make sure I stick it through the hole, and I will pull it up like this. Pull the bottom down and this up. I wouldn't say be overly aggressive with it, but what I will say is, pull it out as much as you can so it looks neat. So the reason that I do the I cut it 1.5 inches shorter at the beginning than the actual length is because I want to have it look very neat, and I didn't want to catch it in the seam. And 1.5 inches seems to work perfectly. So I'm just going to grab my awl here, only because I know I can make this neater. And all I'm doing is pulling this piece out in here. I'm just pulling it up and out just to make it a little bit neater. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that's your bag. Okay, you can iron it because it's cotton. That's your pouch. I have my label on it. But the magic of this, as to why it lies flat, and I'm just pulling, by the way, just pull these sides out like this on either side, is if you take your bag and fluff it up on the bottom, you can then pinch See how I'm pinching that little piece? If you pinch that with your fingers and square it off, and you do the same on the other side, and you can actually put your hand in here and do it if it makes it easier. I stick my hand in there. I've just gotten so used to doing this. But all I do is I simply pull this out. If you pull it out like this, you see how it makes that square? Look. And I'm just pulling it with my fingers. See how it makes that square? I take that square and I pinch it against the exterior, because that's really where the box is. The box occurs, right? Right there. So now that's going to make a boxed bottom for you. So now it won't be flat anymore. So when you put something in there, it stands up. By just simply doing that, it makes the bottom stand up. So you can come back here and you can iron it if you want. The last step, and this is a step, if you want to give this a try, you can. You do not have to. The last step that I do on these pouches, is I take it and I flatten it like this. And then what I will do is, you can iron it, you can roll it in your fingers, however you want to do it. I then go and I top stitch completely around the bottom. I top stitch around the bottom. With the zipper part of it, what you can also do here, which is what I did, is I pulled my lining down. Pull my lining down a little bit here. Just pull it down just a little bit. And it's about a 1/2 inch all the way around. So once I'm done, I pull the lining down. I want to show you what I did. There we go. So it goes down about a 1/2 inch. I tuck my zipper down in there, which is why mine was more recessed. I take my zipper, I tuck it down also in there. And it will push down, believe me. There we go. Pull your lining down. Pull your lining down all the way around. And when you do that, you can create a little lip here as well around your zipper. So I don't know if you can see that. You see how there's this piece raised here? And that you do that by simply pushing it down. Now your lining is shorter. If this is not something that you feel that I want to give it a try, you don't have to. But I'm including it as a reach objective for people who want to try this. And then if I zip it up, what I will have here once I push it down is I will have that little lip. So I'm just going to go off camera a little bit so I can get my hand in there. It's just easier to do it off camera. And then I'll come back and I'll show you. So all I'm doing is pulling my lining down and folding it down. There we go. Okay. So now you can see it. So now when I pull this closed, my zipper is recessed in there. So I push down both sides and it's recessed. On the bottom, I top stitch around this, and on the top, I top stitch around that. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and do that. What I will say to you is, if this is not something you feel comfortable doing, you do not have to do this. Your pouch will work totally fine. Your bottom will stand up. So it will stand up when you put things in it. And you don't have to do this. This is an extra step that if you want to give it a try, you can. I just, I did this on the sample as well. I can show you the sample as well. If I know where I put it, I lost it. But I did it on the sample pouch as well. So you can see here that I stitched. I don't know if you can see it. I actually stitched around the bottom. I did fold this in, so you can see it is recessed. See that? And I did stitch around the top. It's not necessarily something that you may feel that you're ready to do right about now, and you want to stop, before you do this step. And like I said, that's totally fine. Your pouch will function totally fine as well. So I am going to stitch around the bottom, around the top that I've tucked in. I am going to stitch around that at 1/8 inch seam allowance. That zipper, because we did that understitching on the inside, will be sticking upward, and it will be done. So let's go do that right now at the sewing machine. Now this is fiddly. This is why I said if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. I'm going to do the bottom first. It really doesn't matter. I will say to you, I do have a straight stitch machine. So I do not have a machine that has a, what do you call it, a drop where I could take out the piece over here. I don't have that. I have a straight stitch machine. So because I have a straight stitch machine, it is a little bit more challenging for me than it probably will be for you. But it's the same thing, okay? So I'm just going to take this. Make sure when you do this, by the way, that you pull up your lining so you're not catching your lining in your bottom while you're doing this. I'm going to stick this under here. It doesn't really matter. If you can get it at a side seam, you get it at a side seam. If you can't, you can't. Make sure you pull that lining up because you don't want to stitch it down in there. And I'm just going to stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I will back tack. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to show you that it is doable. Because in case you want to try it, you can say, oh, she said do it, and it's not doable. It is doable. Like I said, it is something that, depending on your machine and your comfort level, you may want to give it a go. And once again, it's cotton, so you can always just rip it out if you don't like it. You can just rip it out. If you say, well, I tried it, it's not working for me. And like I said, it's not necessary. It just gives it a sharper edge at the bottom. And if you have a free arm, like I said, this may be easier for you. I do not. I just have a straight stitch machine, so. Okay, so I've done the bottom already, and I'm just going to stitch around this top. Just be careful of the zipper pull. I will say that to you. So, and for this, I am going to add some clips only because I want to make sure that I'm getting an equal distance all the way around as I sew. But once you fold it down, it's fine. One thing about the interfacing and the cotton is it does give you a nice crisp edge, or easy to fold edge, so it works out very well. I tend to sew from the outside here, not from the inside, because this is the part you're going to see, and so I like that to be as neat as possible. Sometimes I will turn a pouch or bag wrong side out just to make it easier for me, like I said, because I do have a straight stitch machine. So I'm going to just try to figure out where I want to start. And I think I'm going to start over here. And I'm just going to sew around. So make sure you open up your zipper so you can get it as flat as you can. But once again, if you have a free arm, this is going to be a lot easier on you than it's going to be on me. And I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch all the way around. what I will say to you is if you stop when you're doing sewing bags or anything, and you probably know this, always stop with your needle in the down position, especially if you're going to start manipulating your material. So as you manipulate your material, you always want to make sure, and my needle is always in the down position. It stops in the down position. And if it doesn't, I make sure I always go back to the down position. And this is where the zipper tab is, so I do have to do a little bit more manipulation here, but it's fine. Okay, so now I've done that as well. So we're going to go back to our cutting mat so I can show you what I've done. So if you look at it, right, I just push this down. I'm just going to push my lining back down. And I'm going to come back later on. I'm going to clean up my thread. In bag making, we do use a polyester thread. So polyester thread is nice because you can burn it, right? We don't use cotton thread. We use polyester. It doesn't break down like a cotton thread over time could break down. This does not break down. So, which is one of the reasons that we use it. And like I said, it can be burnt. So if you have a lighter and you have an errant thread, and I'm looking for my lighter in my little drawer here. There we go. And I can show you. You see there's like a little, see that thread? So I can take my lighter and I could burn it. And just be careful, right, because it is at your bag, and I just burnt it off, so it's gone. So now that has that recessed zipper in there. Okay, just a minute. Please wait. Okay, so now it has that recessed zipper in there that I've put in. And if you look at it, because I've stitched it down, and I will tell you. Okay, this will close across. The zipper will close across like that. And you do have a recessed zipper in there, right? So I think the problem is, hold on. I think I caught my zipper when I was sewing it, but that's fine. It's totally okay. Okay. So when you sew it going around the edge, I don't know if you could see it right here. I sewed around the edge. It does allow for a nice sharp top, and you could see that extra fabric. If you want, you could leave it with it puffed out, which is the way it originally was, and that won't be an issue. The other thing is at the bottom, I also did it. You can see it's a little bit more sharper, the edge, but once again, you don't have to do that. If you just pull in either directions, it will make that box for you. Pull in either direction and pinch the fabric, and it will make that box for you. And then, of course, your bag will stand. All right, so we have this one. We have the sample bag. And you'll see that they're stitched. One I made a little bit bigger. This one, the sample is bigger. This one's just a little bit smaller, not by much. I think by maybe like a ½ an inch or so. But you can see the different bags and the different looks. So same technique. The trick to this bag was about making that bottom so that your bag will stand up. Right, when you put things in it, it will stand up. But of course, when you come home from your travels, you can always just make it very, very flat and put it away. So that is the glow up pouch. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it was very long, and like I said, I like to do videos as I sew the items so you can see the mistakes I make. You can also see how long something takes, and I haven't made any shortcuts, so you're not missing anything at all. You're seeing everything live. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And if you make this, please don't forget to tag hashtag glow up pouch or @sewyourbag, which is my handle on Instagram.